Ward Morehouse, and we're at the Wales Hotel in New York City. My parents lived at the Waldorf Astoria and the Plaza before I was born, and then my father and stepmother lived at the Plaza for 11 years after I came along, and I would visit my father and stepmother at the Plaza and just had a great time. My latest book is called London's Grand Hotels, and extraordinary people, extraordinary service in the world's cultural capital. And it's about 30 hotels in London, from the Ritz, London, to the Mandarin Oriental Hyde Park, to the Savoy Hotel, which is much like the Plaza Hotel in New York City, and is an icon in the hotel industry and among many celebrities.
What did you learn about grand hotels from your travels with your father?
I learned that they were glamorous and a great place to live and to work. He would often go to Atlantic City to work on his theater books. He wrote a book called Matinee Tomorrow, partly in Atlantic City. I would go with him. He lived at the Plaza with my stepmother 11 years. My mother and father, before I was born, lived at the Waldorf Astoria, and I got interested in the Waldorf Astoria as a young journalist and wrote a book about the Waldorf first, and then a book about the Plaza, and then a book about all New York City hotels. I know I left some out. And then one on the latest book is called London's Grand Hotels, and it deals with about 30 hotels in London. It's the greatest collection of hotels in the grand sense of the word of grand in the world.
Why did you choose to write next about London's grand hotels?
I had visited London numerous times, going to theater mostly, and it just struck me that London has the greatest collection of grand hotels in the world, really, even greater than New York and greater than Los Angeles or San Francisco. And everywhere you go, everywhere you look, is a different type of grand hotel. Some are located in grand buildings but have a very modern interior. Some are historic and Art Deco. I tell people what it's like to be in a grand hotel, and to me it's like being in a grand opera or a Broadway musical or a Broadway show without the singing. I mean, many of us can't sing, so that would be a disaster. But it's like being in a grand opera. You have all this great cast of characters all around you doing different things, incredibly speaking, and that cast includes the managers and the bellhops and the wait staff, you name it, and it includes the very important people who own and come to the hotel, as well as the stars. Like in my book, I have Richard Branson and Arlene Dahl and many, many celebrities. Over the years, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall used to stay at the Savoy Hotel in London, which is very much like the Plaza. And to me, hotels are storybook settings to tell stories about great people. They're not so much, my books are not clinical studies of the architecture of hotels. They're really an excuse, shall I say, to do a book about celebrities. Now, Vivien Leigh, who starred in Gone with the Wind, and Laurence Olivier first set eyes on each other in the riverfront restaurant of the Savoy Hotel. Now, they didn't speak, as far as I can tell, as far as from the people I've interviewed, but she went backstage when he was starring in Romeo and Juliet and said what a great performance he gave as Romeo. In fact, I think he was playing two roles, Mercutio and Romeo, in that play, and that was set the scene for the love affair and eventual marriage, and one of the great love affairs of history, and certainly one of the great theatrical love affairs. But that's really a backdrop for great stories about people. Brown's Hotel, right from the start, drew a crowd of celebrities of the time, and became very famous, and famous for its service too, and its catering to the public, and both celebrities and non-celebrities, and that is the real test of a grand hotel in the best sense. that caters to everybody alike, not only to Richard Branson or Humphrey Bogart or Katharine Hepburn, who actually wore slacks and that was a very contrary thing to do. In Claridge's, you got looks and for doing that because you weren't supposed to wear slacks in Claridge's. Women weren't supposed to wear slacks. Now, she was known for wearing slacks. She didn't want to change when she went to Claridge. Claridge's has some of the nicest teas of any of the London hotels. So does the Ritz. I mean, an ingredient that many managers and owners have is the idea of service, which we've almost lost sight of in this country. But service is the first quality of a great hotelier, or in any industry. Aside from service, I think you have to capture the soul of the place. Conrad Hilton, for example, when he captured, there was something about him that caught the soul of the Waldorf. It was big, it was brassy at the time, it was larger than life, it catered to presidents, and there was something that Conrad Hilton could relate to in the Waldorf Astoria, and so he bought the Waldorf Astoria when he could afford it. And Anthony Lee, the manager, general manager, actually he's left that job now, unfortunately, gone on to other things, but he said very pointedly, I represent the soul of the hotel. And it's sort of an obscure phrase, but what it means is I represent all that's good, sort of the essence, that ethereal presence that you can't put your finger on, but makes people feel at home. I mean, when they step into that hotel, no matter who they are, they should be made to feel at home. And that is the greatest thing that a hotel can give you, really. Because all you have, Alfred Salamone, the general manager of the Plaza Hotel, who worked for Hilton for many years, and Hilton owned the Plaza, Conrad Hilton did, he said, all you have when you check out of a hotel is a memory and a bill. Make sure the memory is a good one, so they'll come back. One of my favorite stories about hotels, and I don't think this has been a documentary or a film, is the story of Pamela Harriman, who was later a U.S. ambassador, I think, to Moscow, who met Averell Harriman when she was a fairly young girl during the war, during World War II. And they had an affair, lived at the Dorchester, where he had an apartment. The Dorchester is made of reinforced concrete. And so while other hotels were bombed and suffered significant damage, the Dorchester was left unscathed because it was made of reinforced concrete. Anyway, they lived at the Dorchester for a period of time, and then 30 years later, she married him. And that's a wonderful story. And she was married a few times between the war and marrying Averell Harriman, who she said was the handsomest guy she'd ever met. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor loved to stay at the Dorchester, which is now owned by the Sultan of Brunei. And that's on Park Lane, very, very fancy indeed.